Hey, everybody, and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not News, your favorite podcast about fake news. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kelly.
And I'm Elizabeth.
Hey,
Yay!
Everybody. Yay!
Hi.
We're all together again.
Yes, for the one final episode, we were able to convince Elizabeth to come back with only minimal amounts of jam, promised.
Just a light spreading of jam.
Right.
A hint of jam.
Well, we're very excited to have you here because I definitely couldn't do a wrap up completely without you. So,
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
absolutely. Well, what we thought we would do in order to wrap up the podcast is we want to ask each other some questions and just kind of go around and talk about it a little bit. So we're not going to be presenting a new topic today or anything like that. We're just going to be kind of wrapping up how we felt about some things. So are you guys ready to get started?
Yeah.
Okay. And if I cry, I'm sorry up front. That may or may not happen. I can't promise anything.
All right.
So I'm going to ask a question that I'm curious about for both of you. So, and I'll pose it to you first, Elizabeth. You know, what did you hope to accomplish with doing a podcast about fake news? And did you accomplish that?
Well, when we started, it was right after the election. Yeah. Which is kind of crazy to think about. That was a really long time ago. And it was a really difficult thing to process. And we were looking for some kind of a creative outlet to work through our feelings and our angst. And as not particularly creative or artistic people, or speaking for myself anyway, it wasn't, there wasn't an obvious thing. You know, I'm not going to go write some really angry piano concerto.
Right.
And we came up with this idea, and it was just like it clicked.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. This is going to be helpful. This will help us work through some of our questions, get a greater understanding of our world, and maybe accidentally put some useful information out there for other people that they might enjoy.
Right.
And so that was what I wanted to accomplish. And I think I did.
Nice. So Kelly, what about you when you came on board?
Yeah, so I picked up when Elizabeth had to leave, and I met Beth on the Pod Save America Facebook page, the Pod Save Facebook page. And I've always been very political, but I didn't have any sort of outlet. So I thought that this might be a way for me to do something that I've never done before and give me a chance to, I think the thing that scares me the most is not knowing what's going on and having to rely on everyone else to tell me what's going on, and being able to dig deep into this stuff and find out for myself and be able to share all of that research with someone was something that I was really looking to accomplish. I do think that I accomplished that. I feel much better and much more at peace now than I did when we first started. And I think that is where I wanted to be.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel very similar to what both of you have described. Like, I wanted to be less frustrated, and I wanted to do something, and I wanted to not just do all this research for me. Like, I wanted to share it and give other people the opportunity to benefit from my obsessive research about fake news. So, and I have accomplished more with this than I think I could have imagined.
Yeah.
I mean, when I look back at the episodes, and I'm looking back at the guests that we had on and the things that we learned about and how far my knowledge on fake news has come, I'm just kind of astounded at times. We actually just had somebody email us about a movie that they're writing about fake news and asking for some ideas. And I was like, oh, well, here, let me give you all of this knowledge because,
Right.
and I was joking with Elizabeth. I was like, yeah, I know everything about fake news. I mean, it's
It feels
just
that way.
in my brain now.
Yeah.
And so I definitely feel less frustrated, although it is frustrating the more you find out about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I know so much more about it. And I've also been able to share that knowledge. And, even though we're, not continuing to make episodes at this time, it would be something that people can still go back and listen to and still learn from. Basically, it's almost like a research project that we've put together. So
it really is. It's like a couple of college courses almost, isn't it?
yeah, I should get some credit, right?
We
College
should.
credit. That would be
It
awesome.
does feel that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I want to know from you guys, looking back, what is the biggest takeaway that you think you're going to keep with you?
So I immediately knew the answer to that question because I have continually said it throughout the episodes. Whenever somebody brings up conspiracy theories, I constantly say, okay, go back to Dr. Jolie. What did Dr. Jolie teach us? That, there has to be the psychology of conspiracy theories is that people have to explain an event with something that's just as big. And so looking at just understanding that psychology behind conspiracy theories and why they happen has helped me to really understand why people spread them and what they're trying to get out of them. And it also gives me something to point people to say, okay, go back and listen to episode 6 with Dr. Jolie. It's a really important episode. You need to listen to that one to help you understand. So I think that is one of the biggest takeaways that I will keep with me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think for me, the biggest takeaway that I had, or the thing that sticks the most in my mind, is when we did the episode about the brainwashing of my dad.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when they talk about the cycles in your brain and how your brain becomes dependent upon the anger, and then you get that boost of dopamine because you are winning in essence, and it just the way that your brain becomes dependent upon those emotions, and it's almost as if it's an addiction. I never put any of that together, and it made so much sense as it was explained. And it's something that now I see in people, and I can take a step back and say, you have to look at this as if you're talking to someone who's addicted to something, instead of just, oh, you are completely blinders up, you're stupid. Not that I am big on calling people stupid, but I got a better understanding of why people want to believe the things that they believe, and why something like this is happening in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. That documentary, if you haven't seen it yet, you should absolutely go watch it. It is, first of all, easy to watch. It's not boring. It's super entertaining. And it's so informative and it's so mind-blowing. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That's a really good one.
Well, I think that my biggest takeaway that's more kind of procedural and not like necessarily related to content is that, if you want to do something, you can. And if you ask people for help, it happens.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a great thought.
We were randoms, Beth, absolute internet randoms, starting a random podcast, and Dr. Jolie and Nick and like all these people were down to help out and spread their message. And, we're helping each other. And it was really, really great and super cool.
It was. And it has been really cool. It's almost like a community now that, you're not out here screaming into the abyss. Someone else is out there that you can sort of pull towards you. I think that's a great point.
I do think that it helped that we weren't crazy. Yeah. People were willing to talk to us because we had a good message and we were trying to talk about something really good.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why people were willing to talk to us for the most part. But I 100% agree. Like I said in the beginning, I'm blown away by what we were able to do and accomplish with this. Like it has been just so nice and great to see, people responding to us. And I mean, we never got to the point where we were, big or, doing things like going out on tour or anything like that, which is still fine. We still were able to do some amazing things, even though we were this small little unit. So yeah, good one.
Yeah. So I am wondering, I know that I have my own, but what are the resources that you find that you still feel like when someone posts something fake, or when you see an article and you're like, oh my God, I wonder if that's true. What are the resources that you are using on a regular basis that you feel like are the resources that you would give out because you trust them?
So for me, I definitely fall back on Media Bias Fact Check all the time. That is definitely one of my top hitters. I also share the media bias chart that Vanessa Otero made. I share that all the time with people, especially when they're trying to argue with me about, news sources and their bias. It's definitely an easy one to share. And then what did I used to call it, Elizabeth? Snoops?
Haha, yes. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Still definitely, actually, I'll say this one and then I'll stop so that I don't suck all the air out for Elizabeth. A Pointer. I didn't know about Pointer before, and that is one of the best resources I have found on rounding up news about fake news. And they have all these the newsletter is amazing and it has all these resources in it. And the only problem I have with it is that I can get sucked into it and be, stuck for a day just reading, trying to read all the links on one of their newsletters. But that has been a really great resource for researching about fake news or understanding what's going on in the world of fake news.
Well, I don't know that I have anything to add to that, except that, again, process related. Don't drop a Snoops bomb on someone in a Facebook post or a Snopes bomb. I think that's what we used to call it, where, someone has shared something that is concerning to them.
Right.
Perhaps, oh, I'm afraid of this thing. Right. And you're like, oh, that's fake news. Here's a link. Boom. Done.
Yeah.
Dumbass. Right.
We called it the Snopes mic drop.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you need to, like we've talked about, have a little bit of a better understanding about what's going on with that person. Right. Like you just talked about in that documentary, there are legitimate reasons that this person is sharing this legitimate to them.
Right.
And they might be well-intentioned from their perspective. And they're not going to be as receptive to your message if you are coming across like you're trying to be superior to them or you feel like you're superior. So I think that delivering that message with care and empathy and citing some of these resources and exposing people to some of the resources that Beth talked about is the way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a really good point to make. Yeah. I just still go to check sources on things like Media Bias Fact Check. That would almost always be my go-to. And it's something I share on a pretty regular basis of just saying, I have to do similar to what you were talking about, Elizabeth. If someone is sharing something and it's just the salacious headline and it's from some place that maybe they aren't familiar with having fake news. I see a lot of people post stuff sometimes from the Daily Mail because it's overseas. They might not understand what the Daily Mail is. And, you just have to have some compassion and empathy when especially if you're online and it's one of your friends. Like Is that really something to lose a friendship or start an argument over, whether or not that's just not, the compassion has to be there. Otherwise no one's ever going to, otherwise you just come off like a smart ass
and you further
create
make that divide.
Yeah.
And it's just another brick in the wall.
Right. Exactly.
I think sometimes it's really helpful. I actually sign up for Daily Mail alerts for part of my news alerts just because.
Oh, Jesus.
And here's why I do it is because I like to see the difference between how the Daily Mail is putting it out versus CNN. Because a lot of times they will be reporting on the same story, but it has a vastly different headline. And I also like to know what the Daily Mail's putting out so that I'm prepared for when my Facebook friends are like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, but it goes back to Vanessa Otero's chart where she's starting to break down that difference between, like, look at the headline difference between these. And that's such a great resource to show people like, hey, if you look at this and look at this headline versus this headline, it's the same story, but two different news outlets are reporting on it in a different way. And one of them is making you very angry. And, like you said, Kelly, giving you that boost in your brain for your anger. And the other one is just reporting some factual news, and it's much more factual without giving you that anger boost, but you're not reacting to it the same way. And there's a reason why. So let's take a look at where you're getting your news sources from. So, well, speaking of fake news, I wanted to ask you guys, so since the podcast has started, has fake news changed, for what you're seeing or how you feel about it? Like, has it changed for you?
Well, I guess for me, it seems so much darker and bigger and deeper and more dangerous than I thought it was. I remember, oh gosh, I forget what the episode was, but I think it was the episode with Manny that we were talking about some of the really ubiquitous fake news sites that we see on Facebook, like Being Liberal is one of them.
Right.
And I remember saying, well, is it okay to occasionally share something from that if it's like not that bad? Like I literally said that. And he was like, no. Like, of course not.
Well, and part of his point was about basically that those sites steal other writers' content.
But that's not okay.
And that's not okay. And that's part of what we were talking about with him was that, part of the fake news that he's trying to combat was content being stolen from legitimate sources and being used as these bloggers saying, this is mine.
Right.
So, but yeah, I absolutely agree, Elizabeth. It is, we have, we have 57 episodes showing that it's a lot deeper than we thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would piggyback on that because that was actually what I've seen as well, is that I think when we first started, Beth and I it was kind of, I was thrown in the deep end because we immediately went into the Cambridge Analytica stuff right before all of that shit hit the fan. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I feel like I'm hitting a conspiracy theory. This is crazy. I had always thought about fake news in terms of Fox News. And I had thought, that stuff like going into the Iraq War with WMDs, that was definitely fake news. So there was always these human components to it. But now I see how much fake news is wrapped up in propaganda and is put forward by governments and put forward by foreign governments as well, and what's happening in Hong Kong and what's happening in Russia and what's happening in the Ukraine. And it's so much more insidious. Like you were saying, Elizabeth, it's so much more insidious than I ever knew that it was, because I was always just like, it's mostly urban legends and conspiracy theories. And now I'm like, oh shit, this is really scary stuff, especially with, the deep fake stuff is possibly one of the scariest things I've ever uncovered. And you're the one who came up with that idea, Beth. So
not deepfakes in their entirety. I didn't come up with deepfakes.
No, yes, you did. I'm spreading the news
just the
right
idea
now.
for that episode. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, no, that's fake news.
Yeah.
She did not spread that theory, but spread the origination of deep fakes. But you came up with the idea for the episode, and yeah, that's one that I'm like, oh my God, the future is going to be really scary.
So I have 2 takes on this and that I want to share. One is that in some ways we're starting to see some traction towards combating fake news. Mm-hmm. And I did want to bring up the fact that Alex Jones is currently being sued for libel and defamation, and things are definitely not going his way. He's been taken off a lot of avenues, Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of stuff. And he's still doing his radio program, but in order to listen to it, you have to have like the Alex Jones app, basically, to listen to it. I have a link here to the InfoWars defamation lawsuits. It's called InfoWarsLawsuit.com. And it says, for years, Alex Jones and InfoWars have shocked the world with malicious false statements about national tragedies, including the school shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, and Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Now, Farrar and Ball attorneys are helping victims of those false statements fight back. And this website provides the public information on the 4 defamation lawsuits filed against Mr. Jones and InfoWars by Farrar and Ball. So there's definitely some things going on to help combat fake news. We also have more fake news fact-checking sites than ever. We have social media sites such as Facebook, such as Twitter, trying to fight back against it. And there is definitely a conversation to be had about how they're doing it and if it's going to be successful. But my point is that they're doing it. There are things that are being put in place to help try to combat fake news at a much higher level than what we were seeing when we first started the podcast. And I went back and I looked at the Wikipedia page for fake news, and I was reading through it, and almost, I would say 50% of the information on here has been updated since 2016 when we started the podcast. So reading through it, there's just so much more information now. Obviously, there's been a backlash against the word fake news itself, which I don't necessarily agree or disagree with. I think that's semantics. Like, yes, we can say, oh, don't call it fake news, but it is still fake news. And when Elizabeth and I had started, we really defined fake news as, needing to come from somebody making up a story. We weren't talking about even necessarily Fox News at that point. We were just talking about really somebody making up a story and spreading it with malicious intent.
Right.
And I think that as we've gotten further and further into it, we've really recognized that the propaganda portion, like you were saying, Kelly, is just so overwhelmingly scary. And that that's pushing what Fox News has done to our country is just unethical.
Right.
And just there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So I see some good things. I also see some things that are scary, but to be honest, those things were happening before. We just weren't putting our finger on it and saying this is happening.
Right.
I think a lot more people are aware now of this is happening, and a lot more people are going to get involved in the efforts to stop it.
Yeah. I mean, if I could just add something really quick to that.
Yeah.
Just this morning, the morning that we're recording this, the Supreme Court of the United States has decided not to hear the Mann versus National Review case, which is a climatologist who has been defamed by National Review, and it has gone up the ladder to the point. He's the guy with I don't know if you ever saw it, but it's like a slide or a picture that shows that in the past 200 years. That is when, from the beginning of time to the past 200 years, the past 200 years has spiked our climate change. It looks like a hockey stick. So that's what it's called. And they've refused to hear it, even though Alito said that it would be interesting to have a case where they're talking about public policy, like defamation of things that could affect public policy, but they're not going to even review it. Which means that it stands with the defamation against man, which is good news for people who don't like fake news, and hopefully good news for people who constantly are defaming climate science. Mm-hmm. Maybe we might actually see some change.
I think I almost more look at it now as, instead of fake news, what we need is to fight for is good information. And when I look back at just like the review that we just did on Roger Ailes and how much he, as one person, and it wasn't just him, in that there were corporations involved and other people involved, and it wasn't him fighting this fight by himself. There were lots of people that were happy to jump on that bandwagon. But to have all of those people doing just such a nefarious career to try to mislead the American people, that propaganda, I feel like, has just, I hate to use the word trumped. But that propaganda has overcome fake news.
Right.
The person sitting behind the computer typing out a fake story is only the symptom, in my view, at this point, of the propaganda that was put there first.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that was uplifting.
Listen, it's good news that National Review is not getting to speak in front of the Supreme Court and claim that they have a First Amendment right to basically break down something that is going to destroy our entire Earth. I was very happy, and I was uplifted as Ruth Bader Ginsburg is sick again. And it made me happy to know that, hey, at least they're not going to be listening to these white supremacists who want to destroy our Earth for the profit.
I think it would be pretty fair for anybody in Congress to say that when you're in impeachment hearings, you shouldn't be putting for Supreme Court nominations. just as a by the way, Mitch McConnell.
Oh man, sometimes it's so depressing, and I just feel like this episode of Black Mirror sucks.
Yeah, right. Yes,
it needs to end.
This darkest timeline. Right. Can we get back on the good timeline, please? Is this that place?
Right, yes.
So many things. Yes.
Well, so I'm wondering what your favorite episode is, guys.
This is the hardest question.
It is.
It's so hard to narrow it down, but I took a look back through our episode guide, and I'm cheating a little bit because I'm going to go with the series that we did. But we did that series on voters, voter information. And so it was 3 episodes, and it ended up being episodes 35, 36, and then 38. Mm-hmm. And 35 was a campaign of lies, where we talked about campaigns and how they spread, propaganda and fake news and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then we did the voter fraud boogeyman, which was about all that fake news about the need for voter ID laws and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then we did episode 38 about how to steal a district, and that was on gerrymandering. And the thing is, the reason I picked this series is because I think it really boils down, where fake news is affecting our democracy is in voting and gerrymandering and, voter ID laws and all of these things. These are really important issues. And so that's why I went with that one as my favorite episode. Episodes.
Just 3 of them?
Just 3. I kept it to one series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a great episode, though.
Yeah. I felt like it was one of, I I don't think we did very many lighthearted episodes in the end.
No.
I think a lot of them, most of them, 99% of them were probably just very, very, had some very important information in them. And there is a good takeaway from all of them. But I felt like that series was it just topped the list for me on what was important to talk about. So
maybe we should have just done an episode on The Onion.
Well, Kelly and I did do a satire episode.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that, but we didn't focus just completely on The Onion. Yeah.
Because I like Reductress. Reductress is my favorite Onion because it's all like female based satire.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Elizabeth, I don't know if you wanted to say what your favorite episode was first, or if you want me to do mine.
I can do mine.
You want to do yours?
I could do mine. Sure. Yeah. My favorite probably was Christian Picciolini. Mm-hmm. And, he turned his life around. He started out as white supremacist. He became a white supremacist. And that was who he was for a long time. And things kind of changed for him. And eventually he came to see the error of his ways. And now he is very active in leading people away from that lifestyle and that ideology. And what I really love about his story is just the power of redemption, and it's hopeful. And someone like that, someone that we just revile. And even when I was talking to friends of mine about, I'm going to be interviewing this person, like, ugh,
yeah.
But he's redeemed himself.
Right.
And he's making a positive influence in the world.
Right.
And people are changeable.
Right.
Yeah.
And redeemable.
That's really, that has to be something that we have to just keep in our hearts as we interact with people and try to educate slowly, picking away at the propaganda and at the negative ideologies.
Yeah, he's one that I loved talking with him. We had such a good conversation with him, and it was just very helpful, and he was such a nice person. And one of the things that we had talked about with him was, he says, hug a Nazi. Don't punch a Nazi, hug a Nazi. And that's something that I've gone back to time and time again as well, with talking to people about, hey, like, going out and punching a Nazi isn't going to change their viewpoint. It's just going to reinforce that they're being persecuted. And what we need to do is reach out to them. And, he's not wrong. And I get it. I totally understand why people are like, but I want to punch a Nazi. They're making me mad. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's not going to, like, if a conservative came up and punched me, I wouldn't be like, you know what, you're right. Fiscal responsibility is more important than social issues. Right. That wouldn't change my mind. So I kind of had to look at it that way and go, yeah, he's absolutely right. And I also just want to point out that it did give me quite the little like, when in the last Democratic debate, Andrew Yang mentioned him. Andrew Yang on the Democratic stage at the debates talked about Christian Picciolini.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, he did. And Christian has actually endorsed Andrew Yang. And so they've been working together. But I was like, I interviewed him. like that was pretty cool. Like that's one of those times where you're like, wow, this little podcast has really opened some doors for us to talk to some really amazing people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know. I just was like, not that, that's not my accomplishment or anything as far as Andrew Yang mentioning Christian, but it definitely gave me a little like, oh, I know who that is. I've talked to him. He's a great guy. We joked about Nutella, so So anyway, that was just a fantastic episode. I think that's a great choice, Elizabeth.
Yeah. And I would say, I think that you're totally right. I've read, I think I even mentioned it on one of our jams, Derek Black's book,
Right.
where, I mean, his godfather is
David Duke.
David Duke.
Yeah.
And I mean, his father is Stormont. It created Stormont or Stormfront. Sorry, Stormont. Stormont is a different
the Daily Stormer.
It might be that. Yes, it might be the Daily Stormer.
Yeah.
And he like had a kids white supremacist blog from when he was young, and he came out of it after going to college and meeting people and them not even knowing who he is, but just interacting with people who were different.
Right.
And seeing that the things he had been taught were so untrue.
Right.
And the same thing with the girl from the Westboro Baptist Church who left. That was all from talking to someone who was actually willing to talk to her on, I think, Twitter.
That's right.
You know, every time these people come out, you have to, it goes back to that brainwashing of my dad. It's almost like it's a cult.
Yes.
And you have to basically unbrainwash people from what they've been taught their whole lives. So I think that that's a really interesting one. I'll have to go re-listen to it because I listened to them all in the very beginning when we first started, and now I haven't listened to them in so long, and I want to re-listen to them.
I know. I do go back through the episode guide sometimes, and I'm like, wait, what was that one about? Or like, you know, what was that about? And then you're like, man, I can't even remember my own podcast episodes, but you know, the brain is a funny thing. So
it is. We did an episode about it.
Oh, wait, we did?
Yes, we did. So my favorite, I was actually, when we were having a conversation before we started, I was saying that my favorite was the deep fakes because it scared me so bad. But then Beth went and chose 3. And I was like, why are we missing one? And she mentioned one. And I was like, oh, God, that's right. And I feel like my favorite is the We Believe You episode. It's episode 37. It's the one right in the middle.
It's what we paused our voter series for.
Yeah, we took a break from the voter series to talk about it because it was right in the middle of the Kavanaugh hearings.
Right.
And those were, for so many women, so traumatic to watch her speak her truth in front of Congress and then not be believed at all and have people attacking her. And I love that episode. I thought we really tried to make sure that it was clear these things happen. And the reason women don't always go talk to people about it is because of, rape kit backlogs and the victimization of victims and making them feel as though it was their fault somehow. Just everything that goes into that. And then we provided resources for people to use if they've gone through these things, and just sharing our own stories was so cathartic. And it's an episode that I think we did it. And I felt so much relief afterwards in a way that I don't always. There are definitely times when I research so much, I'm just like, can I just get a glass of wine and not remember the stuff we just talked about? Because it's so scary. But that one really felt like we were putting something out there that I was so happy and would be so happy to share that with someone who's been through that situation.
Nice. That's amazing. Yeah. I know there's a couple times where you get done and you're just like, okay, I don't ever want to think about that again. I think, I always, Elizabeth used to do the editing originally. And then when she left and you came in, I took over the editing. And so sometimes when you're the editor, you're re-listening to the episode, maybe even multiple times before it comes out. Right. But even with that, I always listen to the episodes and I always find myself smiling or laughing. And I always wonder if it's just me laughing at our jokes, but I think we're funny.
We are funny.
But I'll hear things and it will even just put a smile on my face, even just hearing it again. And without having to be focused on, active listening and reacting or like trying to get my internet to work or, things like that, without those distractions, to just hear the episode through there's a lot of times where I found myself, picking up on little things that I'd maybe even missed while we were recording, and just, thinking, wow, that was, good point, Elizabeth, or way to put that, Kelly, or, or, oh, I said that? That was smart.
I know. There's definitely been those moments where I'm like, whoa, I didn't know I was that smart.
Yeah. The magic of editing. Just kidding.
That's what it is.
No, but it just, it's great to have those realizations and those feelings after the episode. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
So Beth, you've been doing this for, I think it's been 2 years.
It's almost 3. I mean,
almost 3?
We started in April of 2016. So it's.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So we have done a lot of interviews. I know you guys did a lot of interviews in the beginning. So who is you guys' favorite guest that you've ever had on?
Elizabeth, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah. I am going to pick Nick Bird.
That was great.
Who was PhD candidate from Florida State, the philosophy department there. And one of the reasons that Nick Bird is one of my favorite guests is because he was just an early supporter of the podcast and was so supportive for us. And I really felt like this smart person, wants to contribute. And it was just such an early boost for us. And if you're still out there listening, Dick, we love you and we appreciate you. And
and that was a great episode too. It was really fun. I learned a ton from that research.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And, we went on to just interview so many people and people who are later mentioned by Andrew Yang on very important stages and stuff like that. But just Nick was the OG for the podcast. And
I 100% agree. This question for me is doubly hard as favorite episode because gosh, who wasn't my favorite guest would maybe be easier, except for I wouldn't want to say that either. But we've talked about, I'm going to eliminate just because people we've already talked about. So we've already talked about Dr. Jolie, which was an amazing interview. It so has helped me shape how I think about things. Nick, amazing interview. Such a great guy. Fun interview. Great episode. Christian Bigiolini, hands down favorite, just in all aspects. But we've already talked about those people. So I feel like I get to talk about somebody else. So I'm going to say I really enjoy and am supporting the Aaron and Dave over at Hear Yourself Think. And they are the husband and wife team that have created this organization to help combat Fox News. And they have these webinars that they do, and they just had such a very good, graceful attitude and are just out there trying to do something great for the world. And I think that if you haven't listened to that episode and you don't know about them yet, go back and listen to them and follow them on Facebook because they are out there fighting that fight to help combat fake news via Fox. So.
Yeah, they were really great guests. And we found them from that brainwashing movie.
Yeah.
The Brainwashing of My Dad. And I think they're a husband and wife team.
Yep.
Aren't they? Yeah. And the stuff they go out there every day and do. And I will say that mine is kind of along that same vein. It is someone who's putting in the hard work, so I don't freaking have to. And I so appreciate it.
Yes.
I get emails from him. I don't remember. It's maybe bi-weekly. It might be once a month. Every time it feels like a millennia because that's what life is like now. But my favorite guest is Will Sommer. He does the newsletter Right Richter.
Yeah.
He is on Twitter, keeping us all safe from, knowing when when the Nazis are marching and what people are doing in the craziest side of fake news from the right. And it's always really interesting. I see him now on the news. I see him, feel like I've seen a couple of people that we've talked to or that you guys have talked to on Adam Ruins Everything.
Yeah,
if you've ever watched
Dr. Jolie did an Adam Ruins Everything episode.
Yeah, he was definitely on one. I feel like maybe Will was on one.
Could be.
But definitely he was my favorite just in terms of, I love everyone we've talked to, but yeah, he's been the one consistent where I'm like, I still so much get a kick out of your sarcastic, dry humor as you are lampooning these people who definitely deserve it.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's nice to know that he's out there doing this for us so we don't have to. I will say, and this is just a by the way, he's working over at the Hill now, which is different than when we interviewed him. I think he was I think
he was just on Medium.
No.
Which you put your own stuff on?
No,
was he somewhere else too?
I want to say the Daily Beast, but I don't remember.
Could be.
If that's correct.
Could be.
But he is at the Hill now, and I will say the Hill has had some problems lately that I was kind of surprised to see, but I believe they also got rid of somebody who had done, it was like an opinion op-ed that was very, very troublesome. And then the Hill, they're no longer working with them. So that was, I just wanted to mention that really quickly because I was kind of like disappointed when I was like, wait a second. Like, I know the Hill's a little bit more conservative, but I felt like I could trust them to put out good, source news, journalists, editorial process, all that kind of thing. And, but this one op-ed that had come out was just extremely troubling. So
I think I know which one you're talking about. And it's so 20 news stories ago that I can't give you specifics. So I'm not going to even really get into it. But I do remember hearing this story.
Yeah. So let's see here. Okay. So what do you guys think? Anything else that you want to share before we maybe do a final jam?
No, I think the only thing I was wanting to also mention was just the SCOTUS decision not to hear the National Review case. But since we already talked about that, I'll put it on the blog for the links to the articles are just coming out now.
Yeah. So. I think I would just like to say thank you to everybody. I especially thank you. First of all, thank you to Elizabeth, because I called her with this crazy idea one day and it was like just ranting and raving. And I was like, and I want to do a podcast about fake news. And she was like, okay, I'll do that with you. And the next day she called and she's like, okay, so we're, how are we doing this podcast thing? Let's get some microphones ordered. And I was like, oh, she's serious. She's going to do this with me. And if I hadn't had her jump on board so enthusiastically and, say, yes, and here's how we're going to do it, order your microphone, this wouldn't have happened. So definitely I want to thank you, Elizabeth, for that. And Kelly, I want to thank you for, when you jumped on, you did so wholeheartedly. And just, it was just fate. I feel like that just brought us together at the right moment. And I look back at how much work we've done together, and I'm just amazed that a Facebook post brought that up. Like literally, like a Facebook post. Right. And you're like, oh, I could do that with you. Call me, I see you only live an hour from me, it just worked out.
Yeah, that was, I think, even the craziest part was we lived so close together. Yeah. And I was like, I remember it being 11 o'clock at night and just thinking, I should respond to this because I'll forget tomorrow. And I was like, I'd be interested.
Right.
And then I went right to dreamland and didn't really think about it until we started talking. And then I was like, oh my God, I could totally do this.
Right.
This would be so up my alley, exactly what I want to do. But I didn't know how to do it, and I wouldn't have known where to start. So thank you both for starting this and getting this to a place where, I could jump in and just do what I did, because I wouldn't have been able to start it from the beginning. I wouldn't have known what to do, and I would have just thought it's too overwhelming.
Right. I think that's definitely the part about doing it with someone. It really does. It makes a difference. And Kelly, you've gotten us, and you had alerted me to there's a Facebook group for like a podcast support group. And a lot of times in there, people will post and be like, I'm doing this podcast with my friend and I'm doing 95% of the work, which is totally fine, but should I blow? And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, you have to have, you can't do that. Like, if somebody's only giving 5%, then they're not going to be able to, manage the schedule that you have to have to really do a podcast correctly. And you're going to get burnout and it's not going to happen. So
that's true.
It's a lot of hard work, and we had to skill up fast in the beginning. I mean, it was basic, really like, okay, so I can figure out how to turn on my computer and I know how to access the internet. And I think there's a microphone involved somehow. But making all that happen was a journey trying to figure that out. I want a podcast support group.
Yeah, right.
That's amazing.
Well, it's funny when I look back, like the first episode that we did, we ended up scrapping and re-recording. And it took us like a month just to do our teaser, like our 1 minute teaser, it just took forever. And then we were so cute because we were like, we recorded this episode and we're like, okay, how do we post this? And then we figured out that we had to have a host. And we were like, what's that? Like, we're figuring all this stuff out. And then like the first time you post, you have to figure out your RSS feed and you have to get connected with iTunes. It's just all this stuff. And it's stuff that you really only have to do once in the beginning, but you have to get it all figured out. And it's not that hard. I mean, we did it and neither of us are super, super technical or went to sound school or anything like that. But it definitely was funny when I look back on it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so funny. Or I hear people ask some of the questions in that group where I'm like, I got you. I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, I just really want to thank Kelly too, because just when things changed for me and I didn't have time to continue with it, you have been so amazing. Aww. As a co-host for Beth. I just really enjoyed listening to you, and I'm so glad that you were able to step up and keep it going. You guys created amazing quality work, and it's just been really enjoyable to listen to y'all.
Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, like you were saying, Beth, when I first started, you guys already had so much of this down. And that was such a relief because like what you were talking about, I didn't know how to do web design. That's my husband's job, and I've not done it ever. So going in and trying to do the blog and not knowing what I was doing, it was very eye-opening. And there were a lot of pictures in the beginning because I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to write. But yeah, now it's gotten to a point where I feel like the blog is cool to stand on its own with the website or with the episodes, and they really give you some background and give you all the sources. And I feel good about, putting that information out there and making sure that people have access to the same kind of articles that we read in order to get that information out there.
Right. Yeah, it can be a little bit over. It's funny because you get used to doing it. And then, so I stepped away from the blog and I've been doing the editing instead. And now when you're like, oh, hey, can you post the blog? And I'm like, so you mean you want me to go in and press the button? Yeah. Because I don't remember where that is. So and even today, it was so cute, Elizabeth, when you were logging on, you're like, I don't remember how to do this. Yeah.
Yeah.
My headphones. I forgot I needed headphones.
Yeah. It's like,
And those things, their batteries were dead, like all kinds of dead.
Yeah.
Good thing I had some.
it's funny. It's just funny when you step away from one part of it even after you've been doing it, like it's hard to remember all those steps and everything. So, but I also really want to thank our listeners and all the guests that came on, and
absolutely,
the people who helped us and emailed with us or sent things back and forth. People who got on and commented online on our Facebook and our Twitter, like anything that, I don't have any delusions that we have thousands and thousands of followers, but, we do get a couple hundred listens per episode. And I think that there are some people that do listen pretty regularly besides the three of us. And, and I just appreciate that. I appreciate anybody who's taken the time to listen or share or talk about an episode. And, we are going to keep the episodes up. I think we can drop it down to where it's like $5 a month to keep the host going. And I don't mind paying that to keep the episodes up, at least for the time being, and give people that backlog. Elizabeth, I did look it up the other day just to tell you our first episode is up to around 700 listens. So that's obviously the most listened to one, which most, I think with any podcast, episode number 1 is the most listened to. So that one keeps chugging along. I mean, every month, all of the episodes get listens every month. So there's people out there just discovering it now and still listening back and still emailing us to tell me things that I said wrong in episode 12.
We do a corrections corner for
makes
this.
me laugh a little bit, but which is totally fine. So yeah, just a big thank you to everybody. So,
and I know the conspiracy theory episode that we 3 did together.
My favorite conspiracy theory. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, but I don't remember. I think it was last Christmas time, but I know that that's one of our highest listens as well.
Yeah.
Which you would think it would be one of these people who's been all over and interviewed and, these famous people, but it's crazy that's people really like all 3 of us.
Oh, nice.
Nice. And they like conspiracy theories too.
All right, ladies. Well, are you ready to do one final jam?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Who would like to go first? I kind of want to go last, if that's okay.
I can go first. I have been, I'm normally an audiobook listener. So if you listen at all, you know that I'm normally talking about my audiobooks. And my son has been having some trouble reading. So we have been sitting down and reading side by side, and he'll read a book and I'll read a book. And I realized I really just want to go back and read all these comic books that I had bought and then never kept up with. And I ended up reading the entire Paper Girls series this past week. Oh. In 1 week, I read 6 collected graphic novels, which was an expensive endeavor, but it was really, really worth it. It's written by Brian Vaughan, who also wrote the Saga series, which a lot of people are really familiar with. It's really great. It's about time travel. It's about the 80s and then goes into 1996 and 2000s and all the way into the future. And there's dinosaurs and there's crazy 4th dimensional stuff. And it is bonkers. And I loved it because at the heart of it, it's a story about a friendship between 4 girls.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, do you have a jam for us?
I do. And it's kind of funny because my jam is also comic book related.
That's awesome.
And that is not normally my jam.
Right.
My husband is very into comic books and I'm always kind of like, oh, that's nice, And so I get kind of tangentially involved in some of this stuff. But my current jam is Watchmen. So the movie came out years ago and I watched it and he's been telling me, oh, this is amazing. And I watched and kind of thought, okay, that was kind of weird. All right. But now
It wasn't great.
The HBO show has come out, and so there's the comic, which is a 12-part graphic novel series, and the movie. But the HBO show really it's not reimagining any of this. It's in that universe, but adding layers to it, and it's really helped me kind of see it differently. And now I am rewatching the movie. I'm reading the comic books, which I hadn't before.
That makes me really happy because the comic book is amazing.
And it really is. And it's so different and dark. And especially if you put it into context of when it was written, and like way back then, people just weren't really thinking about superheroes in that way. And some of them are kind of superheroes and some of them aren't. And it's a weird kind of mixture. But the show on HBO is mind blowing, and just how it brings race into it and exploring that. And I'm just really enjoying it. And I'm totally obsessed right now. And so Watchmen is my jam.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. That makes me so happy because I've been really hesitant to watch it because the movie was so bad. And it's not like the movie was so bad, but it was, if you had just read the comic and then you watched the movie, which is what I did, they don't line up. There's so much backstory. There's so much hidden stuff that's just, you can't put it in that movie. And then they completely changed the ending, and I did not enjoy it. But I love that you're reading the comic book because it is, especially, it hits that 80s Reagan, Thatcher era that they couldn't do in the movies because no one would really get that sort of, that Cold War mentality that, we have to do all of these things mentality. I love it.
Well, you have to watch. It is so good.
Yeah. Which is honestly what the jam of the week is designed to do, is to help people maybe watch or do something that doesn't have to do with fake news. So
yes.
I remember back when Elizabeth, you had guest hosted with me, and your jam of the week was actually a jam of the week that you had you'd read because Kelly had suggested it. So it was like a double jam. But
that's right. It was The Elephant in the Room by John Ronson.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk really quick about that. Like, the reason that we do this jam of the week was to give people kind of a breather at the end, because we do talk about some pretty intense topics sometimes, and some things that can feel overwhelming and make you just want to not feel great. And we kind of got into it. We started doing it in the beginning of the episodes as kind of more of a lead in. And then Kelly had come up with this idea to do it more at the end. And I think that worked really great. I was a little bit resistant at first, I will admit. But once I heard it on an episode, and it was like, oh, okay, this does flow very nicely to give us a nice ending, something different. So, but for my final jam, I wanted to choose a song that would kind of represent how I'm feeling about the podcast ending. And so I chose U2's With or Without You.
Oh.
Which is a great song. One of my favorites.
It is.
I thought it had kind of a nice tie-in that it's an Irish rock band, and Ireland has become a theme throughout this podcast for a couple of different reasons. But it felt right to have an Irish band be the last one. And basically, I just want to convey that, with or without us talking in your ear every couple of weeks, you can still combat and learn about and fight fake news. And I hope that we have done something along the way to inspire you and to help you. Like, Elizabeth had such a great point about talking about, get out. This is a procedural thing of how to get out there and do something as well. And we got out there and we did something. I'm just so proud of everything that we've done. And, this has been such an amazing journey. And I couldn't have done it without either one of you. So I'm so glad I got to do it with you. And I hope that our listeners are able to just take something from this and continue on in, what they're doing to help fight the good fight out there. So
I think that's a great song to leave on.
So I don't think we have to plug our social media at this point. But for a final time, we just want to say, spread jam.
Not lies.